Hello and welcome to another edition of Business Track, a program that takes you through financial happenings within the country and around the world. My name is Chinemerem Joseph. A lot of activities took place last week, and first was on the 2017 budget. While the federal government approved the medium-term expenditure framework, MTEF, and the fiscal strategy paper, that's the FSP, for 2017-2019, estimating that the nation's economy will grow at an average of 3.73% in the next 3 years. The Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udo Udoma, who disclosed this in Abuja last week after the Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari, said the economy is projected to grow by 3% in 2017, 4.26% in 2018, and 4.04% in 2019. The minister said government has set for $42.50 as a reference price in 2017 for oil, and projected that it would rise to $45 in 2018 and $50 in 2019. Well, in terms of oil production, the minister said government would retain this year's estimate of 2.2 million barrels per day for 2017, despite the fact that militancy in the Niger Delta has forced oil production to less than 1 million barrels per day. And then for 2018, government is ambitious and expects production to rise to 2.3 million barrels per day, while in 2019 it is targeting an increase to 2.4 million barrels per day. The Fiscal Responsibility Act requires the executive to prepare the MTEF and FSP and send it to the National Assembly for consideration. And on the exchange rate projections, the budget minister said government would use 290 naira to $1 as the exchange rate in 2017. And then a total of 493.828 billion naira was shared as a federal allocation for the month of July 2016 by the federal government, state governments and local government councils. According to the figures released by the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, the federal government received 129 billion naira, that's 52.68%. States received 68.538 billion naira, that's about 26.72%. Local government councils received 50.527 billion naira, and that's also about 20.60%, while the oil-producing states received 12.874 billion naira as 13% derivation revenue.
The total amount that is to be distributed to all the tiers of government total 493 billion 828 million naira, which is 11% less than the figure that was distributed in the month of June, which was 559 billion naira. This decrease, about 11%, is mainly attributable to a reduction in the quantities of petroleum sold due to the activities of in the Niger Delta, activities of vandals in the Niger Delta.
And just recently, at an interactive session with journalists in Abuja, the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, spoke on the Treasury single account and why the federal government cannot rely on that account, as monies there belong to ministries, departments and agencies of government. Let's hear her.
We started TSA in 2011 when I was in state government. We had about 4,000 bank accounts for the state. And what we did was we wrote to every bank. We said, close all those accounts. We want one account per bank. We discovered billions, some of which had been left in accounts since the 70s. And then we were better able to control our balances. But the reason why you can't just take that money and spend it is that TSA, for example, like the PermSec said, it has money that is not necessarily the federal government's money. So, for example, FAC belongs to state governments. If I take their money and spend, when it's time to pay their money, I'll be struggling. So financial discipline is about knowing what money is yours. And what we've done with the Office of the Accountant General is looked at all those balances, gone to those agencies. Some of them have big balances that over the years they should have paid that money into the Federation account. We are forcing them to pay it in because it's not their money. That is money that should come into the Federation. But to go and take individual agencies' money and borrow from it could cause a further crisis. For example, if I take the oil industry, the international oil companies for the joint ventures, they put their money in to a joint account with NNPC. If I go and spend their money on a road, when they're ready to do their oil drilling, they'll have no money. So it seems like a very good solution, but it's actually not right. Where we get benefits from TSA are: one, control. We're able to see what's being spent. Two, short-term borrowing, like taking overdrafts. We don't do that anymore because when you look at the overall balance, we're usually in some form of credit. But it's not advisable in accounting terms. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Eventually, Peter will come and we'll have a problem. So what we're trying to make sure is that the money that agencies have is accounted for. That which belongs to the federal government is paid into this consolidated revenue fund, and then we can spend from there.
And still on the Treasury single account, that's talking about the TSA, the Central Bank of Nigeria last week enforced the sanction imposed on banks that failed to return the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation and the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company dollar deposits to the federal government's Treasury single account by not selling dollars to them when it intervened on the interbank foreign exchange market. Well, the CBN on Tuesday last week barred 9 banks, but as of today, the banks stand at 8, as we hear that UBA has done the needful and has been exempted from that ban. And it barred 8 banks from participating in the forex market for not remitting a total of $2.334 billion to the TSA. Well, as soon as this happened, the affected banks started sending emails to their customers explaining the situation and asking them not to panic, that their money was safe. The 8 banks, however, still face the prospect of further financial fines, which shall be communicated to them by the CBN in the coming days. And then the TSA forms our discussion on the program today, as we will be joined by my guest very soon, and talking about the TSA, of course, the government's policy aimed at ensuring transparency and accountability of government's funds, but not many people have bought into this policy that has seen over 2 trillion naira saved by the Central Bank of Nigeria. I'll hold it here as my guest talking about Dr. George Ubo, the MD. Panic Alert Security System is in the studio to discuss topical issues with me on the TSA. We'll take a short break here to bring you the food market update, a segment that keeps you informed on the current prices of food items.
Hello and welcome to the Food Market Update. My name is Rukemi Madagwa. On this segment of the program, we bring you up to speed with price of various major food items you consume on a daily basis. We are at Dutako Market in the FCC, and it's time to get down to business.
This one is big bag, 50 kg. This one is 19,000 naira. Then we have the 25 kg. 25 kg is 9,500. There's one we said 10,000 naira for the 25 kg. Mulu of beans now is 400 naira.
White or brown?
The two colors is the same price, whether white or brown, 400 naira.
Mudu of rice?
Mudu of rice is 600.
Mudu of gari?
Mudu of gari is 250.
For yellow?
Yeah, both the yellow and the white, 250.
25 liter
Of oil?
of oil, Kings is 11.5 now. And the 10 liter 4.7, and 5 liter 2.6. Maggi star 6.5 now. Why Maggi no? Ordinary no beef is 6.2, and no chicken is 6.5. Carton.
That's it on this segment today. Do Do join us next week. I am Rukeme Madagwa.
When it's time for Business Track, we discuss happenings in the financial sector of economies around the world. News, special reports, interviews with experts in the industry, the people's opinion and analysis. Join us on Silverbird Television. Let's talk business.
You're still watching Business Track, and thank you for staying tuned. My guest, Dr. George Ubo, joins me now to discuss issues on the Treasury single account. Thank you for coming on the program, Doctor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
All right, let's start our discussion from the 8 banks the CBN suspended from its forex market over the breach of its TSA directive on the over $2 billion NMPC funds they were supposed to remit. How would you describe this development?
It's simple. The chicken has come home to roost, as we say. Reason being, when I was engaged by the federal government, within 27 days I traced aggregate of 324 billion naira, over 600 million of that in dollars, over 500 million of that Keystone Bank in dollars. One account alone is $230 million, an NPC account, the same NPC is talking about. Now, of course, my gripe with the AGF is that he refused to.
Go on.
My gripe with the AGF is that he refused to recover the funds. And of course, I petitioned the AGF to the president. The president queried him. He made his response to the query available to the press, so it is in the public domain. That was on May 8. On May 9, I wrote an open letter to the president. One of the paragraphs, I stated that your cardinal directive, as I call it, for all banks to move federal government funds to Treasury single accounts, that the directive is being flouted by the banks, and that your cabinet members who are supposed to ensure strict compliance, of your directive, to it, Attorney General, Accountant General, CBN Governor, Minister of Finance, that there are a bunch of toothless dogs who do not have the,
So, Doctor, are you trying to say the sanction, the central bank, would have come a long time ago?
Exactly, because this all happened in March, April. Now, for the same CBN Governor to now come out and acquiesce to what I've been saying all this time, that there are TSA funds, so the chicken has come home to roost. And I wrote him a letter last week, the following day actually, asking him to investigate my own, accounts. It's a 5-page, it's got the account names, account numbers, currencies, everything, and the aggregate, and add it up, to whatever you have. When I came out, just like when I came out against the EFCC, it's not a personal thing. We are doing something, we are doing right for this country, and it needs to be recognized. It's not like someone will just come up with figures. Under 27 days, I traced 324 billion. And before the AGF engaged me, I told him, look, without interference, I can trace conveniently 70 billion US dollars in Nigeria here. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, about $75 billion, and because we have the database. So I'm glad that the CBN governor has done this, but there are some other banks with our TSA money, and I've included that in my letter to him and the evidence.
Okay, so Doctor, are we trying to, let's try and marry the original aim of the Treasury single account. Have we in any way defeated that aim? Obviously, if things like this are happening.
Well, the point is this, is the executive branch. The president has given his directive. I was acting within the ambit of that directive. When you have banks not complying with an executive order and the cabinet members who are supposed to ensure strict compliance are not enforcing it, then the center cannot hold. I'm sorry. You know, I mean, you can't come and criticize what the president has done. I mean, he has, given the order, so you need to follow suit. I mean, that is how I understand it.
Well, still talking about the TSA, because so many people, when that policy came up, so many people criticized it and then also questioned how easy these MDAs, who their funds are being taken away into a centralized account, how easy will with them accessing these funds be, how easy the access to these funds will be?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the propriety or impropriety of the TSA regime. What my engagement, was all about is to trace federal government funds. And it's not just, so after tracing it, then wherever the government, if the government wants it to go into a treasury single account, I mean, you have like duty stamps that the banks have been charging for time immemorial. And these are all federal government funds. Those are the funds I have traced. I'm not going to criticize the propriety of what the president has the directive he has given. I mean, it's not my place. I'm sorry. But the point remains that these banks have federal government funds, and we have the database, and they need to return the funds.
So, in other words, doesn't mean that the regulators we have, probably talking about the central bank, is not doing enough of its duties to ensure.
No, in my opinion. When I was on channels, June 6th, I think the last thing I said when they asked me about, solution for these kind of problems, I said that we need to practice meritocracy. And I gave an example. I said the governor of Bank of England, Mark Carney, is Canadian. He's not British. So if the British government can go and recruit someone from Canada to head their bank, because of what he has done in Canada, honestly, I do not support the practice of taking an ex-banker in Nigeria to head the central bank, because the conflict of interest is perceived. But that is a different subject. We can get into that. But the point is, I am about merit. If you can do the job, it doesn't matter.